This video is sponsored by Nanlite. Alright, so this is the last video, I think, of my short film series. A lot of you in the comments after watching the film, you guys liked the story, you guys liked the lighting, but the thing that's for some reason stood out the most on this one was the color grade. I think a lot of you liked the mood of the film, I guess, and you asked for me to kind of break down the colors, so that's what I'll do today. Should I bring this mic a little closer to my face? Yeah, let's bring it a little closer. Let's make that sound better. So although the color did stand out to a lot of you, I actually spent less time on the color on this film than I do on most things that I do. Which there's probably a reason for that, and the reason really is like when you think of commercial work or something like that, you really want you want your image to stand out or really fit the vibe of the brand or whatever. And on this, I got to create my own mood, and I had like something in mind for a very long time of how I wanted it to look. And I'm always experimenting with color. I'm very kind of obsessed with the look of things and the color of things. But I didn't want it to cloud my judgment when I was filming. I didn't want to get hung up on the color because this was an exercise in filmmaking more than it was in cinematography. So I did something actually much more simple with this one. I actually started with a LUT that I built off of someone else's power grade. It's Juan Malara. He actually does a lot of like Kodak emulation power grades for Davinci. He also has LUTs and stuff like that. Normally I kind of build my own LUT. I do all this stuff usually myself, but for this one I knew I wanted kind of a very specific kind of film emulation look. And so I generated a LUT off of one of his power grades to use for this. Now, I didn't just use his LUT. I actually redesigned it a little bit. I took basically his color profile, but then I put it into kind of like the exposure that I like to shoot at. I like to kind of drop my exposure while I'm filming to make sure I have a really nice negative image, like a really nice digital negative. Then I added a little bit more cyan to it to give it just a little bit more of an edge, a little bit more of a vibe. So I pushed his stuff a little bit further. And we'll talk about that a little bit in here when we kind of jump into that. But just kind of realized that going through, just to start off, we monitored every single shot on set with this LUT. Well, technically, some of the shots we actually monitored with the Blackmagic Pocket extended video LUT because sometimes, the LUT that I had designed was too dark and it wouldn't really work when we were doing some of the higher ISO stuff. I didn't have enough time to build a perfect LUT. Usually I build a LUT for like interiors and I usually build a LUT for exteriors, but I did not build a LUT for blue hour or when the sun was almost gone. I didn't build anything for that kind of range. So sometimes we had to use the extended video LUT, but once I got into post, all I did was simply throw my LUT on there and adjust that exposure a little bit. And because we made sure that we had a really nice thick negative on the camera. I never had any noise issues. There's not a single shot in here that was noisy except for one shot, which I talked about in my last video, the gimbal shot with my wife where, we're kind of coming up on here and I really wanted to leave in those fireflies. Oh, by the way, if you haven't been following along on the series, you're going to want to watch the short film probably first. If you want to see, watch the film before I talk about the color grading, the link will be in the description below. And also the camera that we did shoot on was the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. And we used my vintage Canon FD lenses for all this. We did not use any filtration on this. A lot of times I do use a black pro mist or a sending bloom or something, but we did not use that in this film. I wanted a more clean image. I wanted just to lean into the vintage look of the lenses and just stay with that. Because honestly, often when you're uploading something to like YouTube, you're going to lose some quality. So I've kind of been leaning more towards shooting on a little bit of a sharper glass these days, just to be able to have that sharpness kind of come through on YouTube. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit because actually I added sharpening to a lot of these shots, which I don't know if that's common practice for a lot of you, but I find that it is helpful when I'm shooting like on a vintage lens. It's just so soft. And then we're also on a compressed raw image and then it's going to YouTube. I had just a little bit of sharpening in post just to give a little bit of contrast back in the image, a little bit of that texture back, which I feel like works pretty well and I like it. Okay, so we're just gonna dive in here. We're gonna move through this fairly quick because a lot of what this is like, so we developed a look already. I developed the LUT, shot with the LUT on set. So there's not a lot that I have to do in post. Now, some of these shots did take a little bit of extra work, and some shots not so much. Some shots it's literally just dropping the LUT on it and calling it good. So, but that's basically how I always recommend shooting. Build a LUT firsthand. Do some screen tests with your actors, or find the same location or something similar to how you're going to want to, like the vibe you're going to create for your project, and then build a LUT. Build a LUT off your camera that you're going to shoot on and everything, and then use that when you're shooting to monitor off of, because you're going to have much more consistent results once you get to post. It's going to be a lot less work for you to have to deal with. See, you can see the opening shot. I only have 3 nodes. Now, this is probably should have been more like 5 nodes. I did layer up some effects on the 3rd node, but because I wasn't doing a lot of color effects, I didn't have multiple nodes. Usually you would have one, and it's just better practice to have like a node for your sharpening, a node for your grain, a node for your color, a node for your exposure. But for this, I didn't do a lot, and I would kind of blaze through this so I could get it out to you guys. So I didn't go through that process, but I would recommend you having more nodes than I have here. So the first node is always going to be my just like exposure node. That's your flat node. That's the node that's your negative. The next node I reserve usually for skin tones and anything that I want to qualify with a qualifier, because you're going to get a more broad spectrum on that. I don't know if that's the proper way of doing it. It's just the way that I do it. And then my 3rd node usually is going to be my LUT. And then I usually have a 4th node. Oh, and I usually have a 4th node that is usually for any of my like creative coloring that I add on top. This is just the actual tree that I use, so we're just going to go with this one. So you can tell there's a couple things going on here, but let's just, let's turn these off so you can see kind of what's going on. So this one here, this is what the negative looks like. Oh, by the way, when you're in Davinci, you can simply come down to timeline and go to output blanking and put on a matte. So if I don't, here's the full image. This is what we were shooting straight into camera, but then, I wanted to have that cinematic aspect ratio, so I did 240 for this one. And so now there's our framing, and I adjust the framing, I adjust the tilt a little bit on that one. Nothing crazy. You can rotate things a little bit if you want to in post there too. But the first thing I do with Blackmagic footage is I come down to the raw tab over here, and then I change it over to the clip mode, and then I make sure the color science is Gen 5, Blackmagic film, of course. Now, generally speaking, this is actually a hiccup of mine. I actually almost always change my image from Blackmagic to Alexa wide gamut, and then to Arri log C. Now, this gives us a different curve to grade off of. The reason I didn't do that here, I think, like when I was jumping into it, is because I did use that LUT, and you can't actually monitor your LUT off of the Alexa wide gamut in camera, because it's obviously monitoring off of the Blackmagic Gen 5 film log. That's the gamma that it's actually monitoring off of. So normally I do this anyways, just to kind of flatten out the curve a little bit, make it a little bit more pleasant. I find that the colors, even on Alexa log C converted Blackmagic footage, I still find that it looks a little bit better than just using Blackmagic's built-in stuff. But the Gen 5 is still really nice. So for the rest of this process, I did actually just stay with the Blackmagic design film log image. This shot was at night, so it's ISO 1250. You'll see that a lot throughout. And then the color temperature for a lot of the stuff I left at 4,000 Kelvin when we were filming. That way we could have color contrast at any given moment. So if there was a tungsten light on in the room, it was going to look, that kind of orangish red color, that yellow color. And if there was a daylight balance light on, it would be more blue, just to give us a nice color contrast. This is a trick that I learned from David Fincher. He talked about it when shooting on red. He usually just leaves the camera at like 4,000 unless he's straight out in daylight. And that just like automatically gives you that color contrast while you're filming. Now, you'd be aware of this and you have to compensate for it, which brings me to the sponsor of this video, which is Nanlite. Nanlite was nice enough to send out a few lights for us to use to shoot the film, like this super powerful Forza 500. 500 watts of power in an LED light is amazing when it comes to making a film like this. It's usually so hard to compete with the sun, but as you can see here, we were able to use the Forza 500 in exterior shots to help light. And then it just so happens we were shooting in the rain, so the lightning effects that are built into the Forza 500 were super handy. So if you're in the need for some awesome lights for your next project, check out Nanlite's link in the description. Thank you, Nanlite, for sponsoring this video. So this is our log image. I don't think I did anything on the second node. I didn't change any of these settings. I don't like to mess with the raw settings unless I have to. The tint is at 10 magenta. Now it's pretty standard on this camera. I probably just quickly hit the fluorescent white balance on there, which is okay. Probably isn't needed when I'm just shooting with my own lights, but the plus 10 is there and it doesn't bother me that much. It probably honestly adds a little pink to the skin tones and it's okay. And then we go over to the LUT. The LUT I had built. We'll go down here to LUT. It's in my personal ones. These are some quick ones I've been making lately. This one's called Kodak Rain Exterior. So it's the Juan Malara Kodak LUT. And I'll leave a description to his LUT in the description below if you want to try it out. What's cool about what he does rather than using LUTs is he actually builds full-on power grades. So a power grade is basically a saved node tree. And so this gives you more flexibility in post rather than using a baked in LUT. You can just throw the power grade in here and then you can play with that from there. I did not do that for this one, but it's what's cool about Juan Malara. Shout out to him. He makes some really good color stuff. Let's see here. And then, so we had that LUT applied that I had already built, which is basically it's a Kodak 2393 conversion LUT. It's a LUT that's supposed to make it basically look like 2393 film. It's not perfect by any means, but then I wanted to add my own little flair to it, so I tweaked, let's see, I don't think you can see that here because it's on the LUT, but basically I've added a little bit of cyan probably in the shadows using the primaries here. I probably added a little warmth in the skin tones. Nothing really crazy though. That's really all I've done probably. You know, you can do all that stuff here very easily. But that's all I had done on that LUT, and that's the one we monitored with. So for this one, pretty self-explanatory. I also added a little bit of sharpening, and 0.48 sharpening usually is nice, maybe 0.47 if you're on a really bad lens. But I try not to go much further than that on the sharpening tab because otherwise it will start to look kind of funny. And you can change the ratio and stuff on that to see how much intensity there is there, but usually this is just a quick way for me of doing that. Turns out that that LUT wasn't giving me enough boost. There wasn't enough light here, so I actually have the saturation at 65%, which I do fairly often. I kind of bump the saturation up to 60, 65, just to give that a little bit of pop. So if we go to the next shot, it's probably not much different. We've got the 3 nodes here. Sharpening is on. Saturation 65. I mean, this is all the same location, you know. Let's go back to the raw tab though and see if there's anything different. Nope, 4000 Kelvin, 1250 ISO. It's all basically the same. But you know, here we had much more light once we got outside. We were shooting probably at a little bit of a wider f-stop, so we can get that kind of we got kind of f1.4 look on the back of my head here. And so we're actually at ISO 400 for this. So that's wild, right? Like you can, as long as you know how you're lighting and coloring, 1250 here, no difference, but we're at 400 here, but you're gonna have way cleaner shadows on this sensor. Even with that dual gain switch on the Pocket 6K, the 400 ISO looks very clean here. 4000 Kelvin still, same LUT applied. It's really all the same, nothing crazy. It's just important to be prepped beforehand before jumping into this kind of stuff. Seems to be same old, same old. I'm sure there's a little bit of an exposure adjustment on this one. Yeah, you can see that here. Actually, it's a good time to talk about this. If we come over to the waveform, look at where everything's living. Now this is a dark scene, but I like to make everything live below the 640 mark on the waveform. Like all my information's down here. But even if we pop over to this one here, so we actually have skin tones in there, face, and some highlights. Still, the peak is at 640. So my LUT brings everything down. So if you get rid of all this stuff here, oh, we actually shot this one pretty low as is. 640 ISO on this one is what I have it rated at currently. You can see the log image there. So no adjustment on the exposure. We actually shot that one pretty low. But then I bring it down even further to get those blacks really where they're at. But it seems that I have some sort of adjustment here on this node. I actually darkened it even more on, or brightened it on that node for some reason. So often I might qualify the skin here, which we might have done that in some other shots, and to make it a little bit more warm, but because we were shooting at 4000 Kelvin and really having that color temperature shift, we don't really need to do that here. I already had this light pretty warm on his face, so it wasn't really necessary. But if we move on, 400 ISO, it's still the same shot. So this one, you know, this is one of my favorite shots in the movie. It's the one I've been using for the poster and stuff. Probably have a little bit more going on here, but check out that waveform. I mean, there's nothing going on there, but obviously it's very black here. Let's see. No exposure adjustments here. We shot this one at 1250 ISO. We definitely did some stuff here. You can see them. You can see that log image. It's actually quite bright. You know, all the shadows are actually lifted above 128 here, and we're peaking about 640. A lot more to the image, but when I put that LUT on there, we're going to drop almost a full stop or two, just like that. Probably more than that, honestly. Actually, let's just for the sake of showing you, let's compare here. So there's that. So if I just take this image and just bring it all the way down, that's more along the lines of what we wanted to look like. It's more along the lines of what we're going to end up like over here. Very dark, but that's how I like it. The usual sharpening on there. Let's see, no hue effects or anything. It doesn't seem like everything's normal there. Okay, let's blaze past this scene. Not much going on there. You've already seen it. Anything crazy on here? 640 ISO on this one. Just the same LUT sharpening. For some reason I have some sort of curve. Oh, I brought down the blacks a little bit on this one. For some reason they seemed a little bit more lifted. So all I did was take that and just bring it down a little bit rather than using my wheels because I didn't know where it was going to affect things. This one gives you just this is how I just quickly crisp up blacks if I need to. Just bring it down just a little bit on that waveform. Thousand ISO on this one. That's interesting that we didn't switch to the dual gain. Usually once I get past 800, it kind of seems silly to not just go to 1250, but sometimes you will lose some latitude in your highlights when you do that, so sometimes I don't. Look at all the information there, and look at this waveform. We shot it pretty low, but we're at 1000 ISO, so if this was at your normal, be way lower, be way cleaner. Honestly, I should have just done that. I don't know why I didn't. There you go. No noise reduction that I know of. Let's see here. No noise reduction, and it looks super clean still. The Blackmagic's good. You just have to make sure you have enough light in that sensor. So a lot of you might have thought a lot of this was a lot of coloring was going on here, but really there's not much going on. We have a little bit of a tint shift, a little cyan shift on our wheels, and I'm using that LUT. Now that LUT's doing a lot. It's giving in film emulation, so it's definitely remapping some colors. So sorry if there's no secret. I mean, use this LUT if you like the look. Come over to this. Now we're at 4800 Kelvin. That's just going to make it where this light's just a little bit warmer, this tungsten light. So this is just a matter of how you shoot it more than it is color, but you got, of course, adjust this stuff later. So for some reason, I do have a lot more nodes going on here. So let's talk about, maybe I just came to my senses when I was grading. I was like, I should probably do that. So this is our sharpening node. I think there's noise reduction on this node as well. Let's see. On this one, maybe. There is some noise reduction on this shot. This one was a bit noisier, and I'm wondering, let's see why. We're at 800 ISO. Maybe I boosted it for some reason. Let's see what's going on with this image. So there's the flat image. That's with the LUT applied. This time I just used the actual Kodak LUT rather than adjusting much to it. And then we are adding some saturation on that one, 55 saturation it looks like. So this is what it would look like without the saturation. It's kind of a more muted kind of film look. And then on this one, we added a little bit of noise reduction, it seems. I know I just boost up the Luma here a little bit and the Luma over here, and these are attached, and that just, kind of softens that noise out of the image for you. I find that Davinci's noise reduction works really well. You probably don't need to buy another plugin unless you have a really bad issue. I think it probably works well too because it understands its Blackmagic footage, and so it kind of knows how to interpolate it better. That's my guess. I could be wrong. So I always find it works out really well. Actually works good on red footage too, so it's just really nice noise reduction. Okay, so I went through and actually broke down the entire short film, but then I realized that's pretty boring. What are we at? We're probably like 18 minutes into the video so far, and to be truthful here, I've already basically told you all the basic steps that I did for doing the entire short film, and I just basically reiterated that over and over again for every single shot, and that seems like a waste of your time. So I'm going to end the video now. I hope you still got something out of the opening breakdown of the short film and how I did the color. All the principles are there. That's basically what I did for the whole film. But if you have any more questions, just leave them in the comments below, and I will go through and answer as many questions as I can based on the color from the film. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the abrupt ending, but that's just how things go sometimes when you're doing stuff like this. But I really appreciate you watching. I appreciate all the support on the short film, and I want to thank Nanlite for sponsoring this video. Until next time, guys, I'm Spencer Sakurai. See ya.